besides what Stephanie White said last night. This is Outkick. And Outkick is saying that as they were getting ready to ask a question of Stephanie White, by the way, Caitlin Clark did not come out for reporters after her triple-double.
I want you to watch that body language very carefully and pay close attention, because what you're seeing isn't ordinary frustration. It's the expression of someone who is literally witnessing a professional sports league sabotage its own explosive growth right before their eyes, in real time.
I think this might have been before the game, actually. The Fever coach Stephanie White has asked her stance on males playing in women's sports.
What's your stance? What is your stance on men or athletes who test as biological male participating in women's sports? What's your personal stance?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would say that I'm educated enough from a scientific standpoint. I don't ever believe that exclusion is an answer. I just don't. I do think, when we think about various levels of sport, various governing bodies of sport and things that go into that, like I said, I'm not educated enough at the different levels. I know growing up, I played with the boys all the time.
So
there weren't girl sports.
Would you welcome a biological male in WNBA?
Again, it's like, I don't know, when we talk about biological male and scientifically where we are, I think it's a totally different scenario. As I said, I'm not educated enough in terms of transgender and transitioning to give you a smart.
And listen, what we're about to break down today isn't simply another WNBA controversy that's going to disappear by tomorrow. What we're seeing here is a long-standing, deeply embedded pattern of complete self-destruction operating at a systematic level.
All right, so we're here at it's the Fever and the Fire game at the Moda Center, and these young women showed up to do what?
We showed up today here in support of Sophie Cunningham and her stance on biological men in women's sports, and being the first professional athlete to stand up and say that she doesn't think it's fair, and do it in a very respectful, kind, and loving way. So we're here to support her.
We're here to support Sophie in keeping women's sports about women and girls. Bravo. Bravo. The league is a mess.
This isn't an isolated incident. It's unfolding across multiple franchises at the same time, with head coaches, front office personnel, media representatives, and PR teams all heavily involved. Based on the timeline of the footage, it honestly appears this particular meltdown may have taken place before the game even tipped off, making the entire situation even more unbelievable when you consider where the priorities seem to be.
For supporters, well, my goodness, the WNBA cannot stay out of their own way, and they will gripe about people making videos about this when you literally created this controversy yourself. We got Stephanie White making comments about the fact that she can't scientifically identify the difference between a man and a woman. That's real. We got the Portland Fire coach also making comments. We got girls from Sophie's rally, the rally supporting Sophie Cunningham, making comments, but that's not where we're going to start.
Now, here's what makes Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White's response so remarkably revealing, and, honestly, quite surprising. You have to keep the context in mind. She's the head coach of a team built around Caitlin Clark, who is, without question, the biggest and most unmistakable superstar the WNBA has ever had throughout its history.
Is there any frustration, because you guys are in a really fantastic run, that this is distracting from that?
There is a frustration, of course, because we want to talk about basketball, and we want to continue to work on our game, and we want to continue to grow as a team. But I also understand, this is part of our growth edge as a league, right? It's part of our growth edge as a league, and we have to be able to manage. We have to be able to insulate as much as we can, and then we have to be able to lead with conversation.
Hey.
Think about it. Stephanie White has the attention of the entire sports world focused on her program right now. Yet, in the middle of that unprecedented spotlight, she sat there and directly told a credentialed reporter that she couldn't scientifically answer a basic, fundamental question.
Alex Samara.
What's your stance on athletes who are biologically male participating in women's sports?
Yeah, I mean, my focus as a basketball coach, I be completely honest, like I don't think I've ever had to think about that. I'm completely supportive of people from all communities, all walks of life. So that's my stance completely. You know, I'm supportive of everyone in the Portland, you know, the community.
Would you be okay with biological males participating in the WNBA?
I think I've given my answer already on that question. I don't feel like I need to go.
He dodged it. He dodged.
Just take a moment and let that sink in. The head coach of the most heavily scrutinized team in the history of women's basketball is freezing on camera while claiming scientific uncertainty over a straightforward question. Let's call it exactly what it is. The league is an absolute mess at the highest level. But here's where the entire story becomes truly fascinating for anyone paying attention. While professional head coaches are stumbling over what should be simple softball questions, and while anxious media handlers are shutting down entire press conferences to avoid accountability, the people who actually fund the league, the paying WNBA fans, decided they had something to say. They showed up in person for the Fever versus Fire game. And they weren't there just to watch basketball. They arrived with a clear and unmistakable message that the league office appeared completely unprepared to confront. We're talking about real, dedicated young women who took the time, spent the money on gas, and drove all the way to the MOA Center in Portland for one specific purpose: to proudly and loudly support Sophie Cunningham. And why did they choose to support her? Because she became the first active professional athlete willing to publicly state what she viewed as the common-sense position, that biological males should not compete in women's professional sports. I want you to stop for a moment and consider what that actually means for the business of basketball. These are ordinary fans, the same paying customers this league desperately depends on to survive and grow, voluntarily organizing at their own expense to support a player. Yet because that player expressed a cultural viewpoint that apparently makes league officials uncomfortable, the entire situation is being treated like a major crisis. Let's make one thing absolutely clear. These young women were not angry protesters trying to stop the game. They were not creating disruptions or attempting to ruin anyone else's experience. They went online, used their own credit cards, and purchased full-price tickets to attend. They were in the arena for one reason only: to support a player they admire. In other words, they were engaging with the WNBA exactly the way every professional sports league hopes its fans will. So what was the league's response to this kind of organic fan support? It created an intensely defensive atmosphere where even politely asking a professional question about the issue could result in a reporter being shut out of a press conference and treated as though they were a threat. Now, let's look at the facts surrounding the player involved. Sophie Cunningham didn't launch into an angry rant or make hateful remarks. She didn't personally attack anyone or attempt to tear another individual down. She simply expressed her belief that women's sports categories should be reserved for biological women. That was the entirety of her statement. Yet, for making what the speaker describes as a mild and standard comment, she was loudly booed by the crowd in Portland. I'm serious. The fans in the arena booed a professional athlete. And remember, they weren't booing her because of poor performance on the court, nor were they reacting to dirty play against their favorite team. According to the speaker, they booed her solely for expressing what was described as a mainstream opinion that numerous national surveys indicate the overwhelming majority of everyday Americans support. So let's step back and connect the dots, because what we're watching isn't random or disorganized chaos. It's a predictable institutional pattern. Consider the history. The WNBA spent nearly 3 decades struggling for every bit of mainstream attention it could attract. 4 years, television ratings were extremely low. Attendance at games remained consistently weak, and mainstream media coverage was minimal, largely confined to niche sports publications and local reporting. Then Caitlin Clark entered the league, and almost overnight, millions of people who had never watched even a single quarter of women's basketball suddenly began tuning in. The audience changed dramatically. New demographics arrived, people with different political perspectives started watching, and major national media outlets finally began covering regular season games. After waiting 27 years for precisely this kind of breakthrough, what was the league's institutional response? According to the speaker, shut it down, try to control it, and actively insulate the league from it. And, according to the speaker, those weren't invented words. They were Indiana Fever head coach Stephanie White's exact statement on camera. Looking directly at a reporter, she said, "We have to be able to insulate." But that raises an obvious question. Insulate from what, exactly? Insulate yourselves from what, exactly? Are you trying to shield the organization from the very paying fans who are finally filling your arenas? Are you attempting to protect the team from the major national media outlets that are now covering your games every single day? You're essentially building a wall to separate yourselves from the same mainstream attention and financial opportunity you've spent the past 27 years asking the public to provide. It's completely unbelievable. Just look at how far things went with the PR staff. The Indiana Fever's official media representative literally stepped in and abruptly ended a live press conference for the specific purpose of preventing an Outkick reporter from asking any additional questions. For anyone unfamiliar with the media landscape, Outkick is a major platform owned by Fox Corporation, reaching millions upon millions of loyal daily readers. The reason they're now covering the WNBA so extensively is because Caitlin Clark's arrival made the league relevant and compelling to their massive mainstream audience. Yet instead of welcoming that enormous new audience with open arms, the Indiana Fever's response was to dismiss the outlet as though it were nothing more than a fringe blog rather than a legitimate, credentialed media organization. I want you to pay close attention to the way Stephanie White frames this entire situation using corporate-style language. She actually describes what the speaker characterizes as a completely avoidable PR disaster as part of the league's growth edge. Think about that phrase for a moment, growth edge. She's presenting it as though a reporter asking simple, standard questions about competitive fairness in women's sports is merely an unavoidable growing pain that the league's front office somehow has to navigate. And without missing a beat, she goes on to argue that the players need to be insulated while, at the same time, insisting the league wants to lead through conversation. But based on what we just witnessed with the Outkick reporter, that vision of leading with conversation apparently doesn't extend to engaging with mainstream media outlets that haven't first been ideologically approved behind closed doors. The basic reality of professional sports is that you can't have it both ways. No matter how much you try, you cannot tell investors you're seeking major business growth while simultaneously trying to insulate yourselves from the very audiences capable of driving that growth. You can't appear on television asking for mainstream media attention, then panic and shut down live press conferences the moment those same media organizations arrive at your arena with microphones. And you certainly can't stand behind a podium talking about leading with conversation, only to immediately refuse to engage with reporters or fans who ask questions you find even slightly uncomfortable. The level of contradiction coming from the league office isn't merely confusing, it's genuinely astonishing to watch from an organization that presents itself as professional. Now let's discuss the financial reality that, according to the speaker, the league office never wants to address. The WNBA has been financially subsidized by the NBA throughout nearly its entire 3-decade history. During that time, the speaker claims the league has never generated a consistent profit, never maintained sustainable mainstream television ratings, and has never achieved true financial independence as a standalone sports league. Yet now, in what the speaker describes as the first season with genuine, large-scale mainstream interest and significant new revenue opportunities, what is happening? According to the speaker, league officials, PR teams, and head coaches are actively pushing away the very demographic that represents the financial growth the league has long sought. Then there's the situation involving Alex Samra. When faced with pressure, the speaker argues that he avoided the question entirely. In fact, according to the speaker, the Portland Fire coach's response was even more dismissive and arrogant than Stephanie White's. He told the reporter, "My focus is as a basketball coach. I don't think I've ever had to think about that." Take a moment to consider what he's claiming. You're employed as the head coach of a women's professional basketball team, yet you're looking directly into the camera and saying you've never stopped to think about what biologically defines the women's sports category in which you work. According to the speaker, that statement is either an intentional attempt to avoid the issue or a remarkably troubling admission of professional negligence. And immediately after offering that explanation, he shifted into a familiar public relations message by saying, "I'm completely supportive of people from all communities or walks of life." I want you to pay close attention to that wording because, according to the speaker, it's a classic example of media training. He's intentionally responding to a different question than the one that was actually asked. The reporter wasn't asking whether he generally supports people from different communities. The question was specifically about competitive fairness and whether biological males should be allowed to compete against biological females in professional sports. Those are two separate issues, and according to the speaker, merging them into a single broad talking point is a deliberate strategy to redirect the conversation. And here's the kicker. When the reporter simply does their job and follows up with a direct yes or no question, asking, "Would you be okay with biological males playing in the WNBA?" he smugly responds, "I think I gave my answer already on that question." Let me be clear. No, you didn't. You completely avoided giving a direct answer because you were afraid of the backlash. And everyone watching that exchange could plainly see exactly what happened. So here's the fundamental business reality that, according to the speaker, league executives still don't seem to understand, no matter how often it backfires. When you deliberately create these large, entirely avoidable controversies, when head coaches freeze on camera and cannot answer basic questions about their own sport, when nervous PR staff physically shut down live press conferences to stop reporters from asking questions, and when an atmosphere develops where paying fans are booed simply for supporting players who express what the speaker describes as mainstream views, you are not protecting the league. According to the speaker, you're actively, intentionally, and significantly damaging the long-term future of your own product. Put yourself in the position of the average casual sports fan who only recently started watching women's basketball because of the Caitlin Clark phenomenon. This represents an enormous new audience. Maybe some of these viewers consider themselves politically moderate. Maybe others lean conservative. Or perhaps they're simply basketball fans who enjoy watching elite competition and have no interest in modern political debates. Whatever their background, their experience follows the same path. They turn on the television, watch an exciting and highly competitive basketball game, then naturally go online to places like Twitter or ESPN to learn more about the league they've just discovered. And what do they immediately find? According to the speaker, they're flooded with viral stories about professional head coaches who appear unwilling to define what a woman is when asked on camera. They see headlines about team press conferences being cut short to prevent certain mainstream media outlets from asking questions. They read story after story suggesting that ordinary paying fans are treated as though they don't belong unless they embrace a particular set of approved political viewpoints. Yet despite those opportunities, the speaker contends that the league's institutional response has been to generate one unnecessary controversy after another. According to the speaker, the strategy has become avoiding straightforward questions on camera, abruptly ending live press conferences, and treating new paying fans as though they are a problem to be eliminated rather than a solution to the financial challenges the league has faced for decades. The speaker argues that it is becoming increasingly obvious that the WNBA struggles to avoid creating obstacles for itself. And they emphasize that they do not view this as merely personal opinion or biased sports commentary. Instead, the speaker argues that the conclusion is based on what they see as a repeated and observable pattern of self-inflicted public relations mistakes documented throughout the events discussed in the video. Looking back over the timeline, the speaker contends that every one of these highly public controversies could have been avoided with a small amount of common sense. Furthermore, they argue that each situation became significantly worse because of what they describe as the league's own defensive and confrontational public relations response. And according to the speaker, the worst part of all is that every one of these unforced mistakes drives away the very kind of mainstream attention and sponsorship revenue that could finally, after nearly 30 years, allow the WNBA to become a financially independent professional sports league. With all of that context in mind, here's the multimillion-dollar question the speaker wants viewers to answer in the comments. Do you honestly believe the WNBA can overcome what the speaker sees as its own worst instincts and grow into a truly mainstream sports league? Or do you think it will remain a heavily subsidized niche product because, according to the speaker, the people running the league continue to reject the very audiences that could make it profitable? The speaker argues that, based on what has unfolded publicly week after week, league leadership appears determined to choose the second path, regardless of the long-term financial cost. And the speaker adds that if this is genuinely the deliberate business strategy being made behind closed doors by league officials and team owners, then so be it. But, in that case, a new standard should apply. According to the speaker, the league should stop appearing on television to complain about television ratings compared with the men's game. It should stop asking national sports media for additional attention and coverage. Most importantly, the speaker argues it should stop blaming outside forces for financial limitations that the speaker believes are the direct result of its own leadership decisions. The speaker then recaps what they view as a series of missed opportunities. According to the speaker, the Indiana Fever's PR department had a simple opportunity to handle the Outkick reporter in a routine, professional manner, but instead escalated the situation into a physical confrontation. Stephanie White, the speaker argues, had an easy opportunity to provide a straightforward answer to a basic question, but instead chose what the speaker describes as an evasive response on national television. The crowd in Portland, according to the speaker, could have attended the game and simply enjoyed watching professional basketball, but instead spent the evening booing an opposing player because of her off-court views. League executives, the speaker contends, had repeated opportunities to allow the situation to unfold naturally without intervention, yet repeatedly chose actions that turned it into what the speaker describes as a major, brand-defining controversy. According to the speaker, this is simply business 101, and they find it astonishing that professional executives would fail to recognize it. The speaker argues that a billion-dollar entertainment business cannot be built on what they describe as intentional exclusion while simultaneously promoting public campaigns opposing exclusion. Likewise, the speaker contends that it is impossible to expand a fan base by alienating potential customers who do not already share the same political perspective. The speaker also argues that lasting mainstream success cannot be achieved while treating major, established media organizations as though they are unworthy of engagement. Finally, the speaker points to what they view as the league's current opportunity. They argue that the WNBA now has two major stars who are driving national attention. According to the speaker, the league is experiencing a level of mainstream visibility that its founders could only have imagined, with major national media outlets that had previously shown little interest now actively following the league and its day-to-day storylines. They now have thousands upon thousands of enthusiastic new fans attending games and purchasing merchandise. People who, before this season, had never even set foot inside a WNBA arena. When you look at the full picture, everything the league has publicly said it wanted and needed over the past 3 decades is finally happening in real time. Every piece appears to be in place for the league to achieve the breakthrough it has been seeking. Yet, according to the speaker, despite all of those opportunities, the league is completely fumbling the moment. And the speaker argues these aren't simply innocent rookie mistakes. Instead, they contend the mistakes are being made deliberately and systematically, spanning multiple franchises and coaching staffs. According to the speaker, the same pattern continues day after day, with no apparent lessons being learned from the previous controversy. Before you leave this video, the speaker asks you to share your thoughts in the comments. What is your honest assessment of everything that's been happening? Do you believe this ongoing pattern of self-sabotage is the result of extraordinary front office incompetence from people who are simply overwhelmed by the moment? Or do you think the speaker's described pattern of exclusion reflects a deliberate and carefully calculated strategy directed from the top of the organization? Let me know what you think. Because, according to the speaker, after watching what they describe as the mishandling of such a remarkable opportunity, they honestly can no longer decide which of those two possibilities would be more damaging to the league's future.